Directly after World War II, Japanese media consumption was at an all-time low. For the most part, materials were widely unavailable, and the war depleted Japan of a large portion of its economy. Even worse, once SCAP arrived for the occupation of Japan in 1945, they began to implement their own ration system for materials needed to produce different media. This put most publishing companies at even greater risk of bankruptcy. Despite these challenges, different kinds of media in Japan were able to continue through the war and even through American occupation. One fine example of this is the Japan Times, also known as the Nippon Times. The Japan Times was a newspaper publication that dates back to the Meiji era and still continues to thrive today in the digital media world. During the occupation, the Japan Times was one of the leading sources of international news written in English for the Japanese people to better understand political situations outside of the nation. There were also forms of American media that were distributed to Japan as a form of propaganda to the American lifestyle. Versions of Reader's Digest were published in Japanese and were distributed to the people of Japan. This form of media was quite different from the media consumed before the ending of the war, which aided in the massive following it received in Japan. The United States was able to use the magazine to spread anti-communistic sentiments throughout the Japanese population through this form of media. SCAP was also able to use the Reader's Digest to spread more ideas of American democracy and politics that would lean the thoughts of the population towards the American side over communism. Along with the introduction of American magazines, SCAP was able to implement stricter censorship and control over media that was released to the public. The CIE section of SCAP was created for the purpose of re-educating the Japanese people on the principles that were set out at the beginning of the occupation. The Americans wanted the Japanese to believe that the previous way of thinking in Imperial Japan was incorrect and that they should change for their own good. This media censorship in Japanese media continued until the peace treaty between the United States and Japan was signed in 1951. After the American occupation, the media in Japan was able to take a turn away from what was published directly after the war. For a brief period, many publications were made about the war and SCAP. These books were also some of the first instances of anti-American sentiments that were able to reach the public. Some books even involved personal stories of veterans from World War II, which gave insight to the public on what the war was like for the Imperial Japanese side from the soldiers' perspective. In 1955, around 10 years after the war, publication companies introduced bukus, or art books, to move media into a more heartwarming and peaceful side. The books contained many different artistic images and would be sold for very cheap prices. For a time, this form of media dominated what was being produced by publishing companies. Most media during the post-war period was defined by the avant-garde movement that lasted from 1955 to around the 1970s. This was also the period in which women artists were more prominent because of art schools admitting more women to study the medium of art. The avant-garde movement promoted more expressionism and was shown through media like art, videos, literature, and film. There are many pieces from that movement that have survived and are available for viewing today. Today, modern media has taken a brand new shape that is consumed by many in Japan. Although most modern media is different from that of the post-war period, there are no signs of the influence of mass media to ever decline in Japan.